Hey everyone, welcome back. If possible, you can support me via PayPal or become a channel member to help me keep this channel running. Thank you. Now let's get back to the story. Chapter 993, Hunting to Kill. In the dark currents on the seafloor of the Forbidden Sea, Floating Fiend sped along with a dour expression and a heart overflowing with unease. He didn't dare to hesitate or slow down for even an instant. A moment ago, he had vaguely sensed some mysterious and ancient power locking onto his position. He had attempted to erase the sensation but had failed. As his heart thumped thanks to the intense sensation of impending disaster, he accelerated, turning into a blur of afterimages that shot off into the distance on the seafloor. He even performed an incantation gesture to start an immortal skill. This immortal skill was similar to a teleportation, but the way it manifested was unusually gruish. What was more, it required paying a heavy price. Back when he was in the Imperial Sovereign level, he could have activated the immortal skill in an instant. And though the price to pay would still have been high, it wasn't something he would have balked at. But now it not only took a lot of time but also required an even greater price. Unfortunately, he had no other options to pick from. As the immortal skill seed took root in his sea of consciousness, his mind trembled. The Patriarch perished. The Holy Land must have fallen into catastrophe. Bitterness filled Floating Fiend as he thought back to what the Holy Land had been through in recent years. He couldn't prevent a feeling of regret from filling his heart. However, despite the clear regret within him, he knew that the situation had reached the point at which such regret was pointless. What was more, he didn't have the deep attachment to the species that the Patriarch did. Personal growth had always been his main priority, and he was ready to pay any price to make that happen. That was why he was fully aware that, if he could do everything over again, he would make the same choices as before. The idea of becoming a summer immortal was so incredible that he would face countless dangers for the sake of it. He just couldn't resist that temptation. In fact, even if a destined opportunity only came with a slim chance of success, he would take it. After all, this was good fortune leading to the possibility of becoming a summer immortal. From ancient times until now, the revered ancient mainland had only seen a handful of individuals who reached that level. If he could do so, then he would have terrifying strength akin to that of a true god. If that happened, he would be an important person even out in the sprawling starry sky. In fact, he would be like that certain exalted individual, and could pursue a path leading to a realm without parallel in history. Summer immortal. What a pity. What a real pity. Floating Fiend still wasn't ready to just give up, and that defiance soon turned into madness that caused his eyes to glitter. Around that time, a terrifying pressure began to weigh down on him. A deafening rumbling sound filled his ears, interrupting his thoughts and caused his face to fall. He looked up. What he saw was a stupefying sea of flames. The seawater was burning. Red fire spread everywhere, completely wiping out the mutagen in the area and turning the sea back to its normal color. The high temperature even reached down to the seafloor. In the middle of the sea of flames was a huge vortex, spinning endlessly. Out of it stepped two figures. One of them caused Floating Fiend's heart to fill with even more intense defiance. But before his emotions could get completely riled up, an illusory version of Flame Phoenix arrived along with the third figure. A piercing cry erupted from Huang Yan as he stepped out, and his eyes pulsed with killing intent as he stepped toward Floating Fiend. The moment his foot fell, the seafloor trembled, and the burning of the seawater intensified. Floating Fiend shivered and coughed up a massive mouthful of blood. After being resurrected thanks to the memory transfer immortal skill, he was no longer an imperial sovereign, but rather had fallen down to the smoldering god level. Thus Flame Phoenix's wrath was far more than he could stand up to. In an instant he was seriously injured by Flame Phoenix. As more blood sprayed out of his mouth, his cultivation base destabilized further. His momentum in fleeing was interrupted, and the immortal skill seed which had been brewing within him began to go out of control. Huang Yan was already right in front of Floating Fiend. He waved his hand. Terrifying force erupted from Flame Phoenix. The flames on the seafloor converged, turning into a tempest of fire that swept toward Floating Fiend. The disparity in power levels was so immense that any sort of resistance was meaningless. Floating Fiend shook violently as he coughed up over a dozen mouthfuls of blood. At the same time, His cultivation base became so unstable that it started falling. From the great circle of smoldering god, he fell down to the level of a 5-world smoldering god. It was such a critical moment that Floating Fiend couldn't bother waiting for the immortal skill seed to finish brewing in his sea of consciousness. Face distorting with pain, and heart surging with terror, he held back nothing to activate it. A boom rang out as he exploded, turning into a host of scintillating threads that vanished without a trace. As Huang Yan stood there, he turned to look coldly off into the distance. By now, Su Qing and Erniu had fully emerged from the vortex. Huang Yan had obviously been keeping tight control over his attack earlier. Su Qing, I know you want to kill him with your own hands. As of now, his cultivation base isn't high enough for him to be a threat to you. And I interfered with his secret magic so he couldn't get very far away. Su Qing nodded. His relationship with Huang Yan was second only to his relationship with Erniu. Therefore, there was no need for further words. Eyes turning cold, he sent his god perception out to contact the countless sounds on the seafloor. They included flowing water, fish swishing their tails, sea beasts howling, and the grains of sand rubbing against each other. There were numerous noises that all converged into the sound of the forbidden sea breathing. Within that breathing, Su Qing was able to sense Floating Fiend's heartbeat. Found him, he said calmly. He took a step in that direction. Huang Yan didn't join him, but instead sat down cross-legged and looked over at Erniu, who seemed raring to go. Have a seat, Huang Yan said. He can handle things going forward. Erniu hesitated, as he was interested in watching the show. But after casting a glance at Huang Yan, he chose to sit down. A moment later he sighed. Second brother-in-law. Erniu, you said something a while back that I haven't forgotten. In fact, I remember every word you said. Very clearly. You were planning to visit my home to do some training. You said you made a lot of preparations. You even said you had a way to sneak inside. Go right through the front door. You were completely prepared for everything. Huang Yan smiled enigmatically. Erniu blinked a few times, then shook his head. Something is off about little junior brother. No, this won't do. I need to go see what's happening. He rose to his feet and tried to leave, only for Huang Yan to throw his arm around his neck. He's fine. I'll keep an eye on him. Now let's have a nice little discussion about how you plan to get into my house while I was sleeping. Come on, tell me all the little details. As Huang Yan and Erniu had a friendly little chat, there was a spot some distance away on the seafloor where a host of scintillating threads appeared and converged into the shape of Floating Fiend. The moment he materialized, he coughed up several mouthfuls of blood. At the same time, he seemed to wither, his face turning pale as he looked around to check his surroundings. When he found that he hadn't escaped very far away, his heart filled with incomparably intense pressure. However, without the slightest hesitation at all, he gritted his teeth and burst into motion, all while starting the same immortal skill seed as before. The complete immortal skill seed requires an incense stick's worth of time. His anxiety didn't reduce the amount of time he needed. Heart pounding, he accelerated, piercing through the water. However, even as he sped up, he heard a sound in the sea. The first thing that reached his ears was a noise like rushing water. The sound filled the area, turning into ripples that caused Floating Fiend's face to fall when they touched him. Not good. He wanted to block them, but he couldn't. An instant later, the sound of rushing water turned into an explosive rumbling, and then into a terrifying and deadly force. It was the authority of sound. Floating Fiend trembled violently. Back when he was an imperial sovereign, it was easy for him to look down on Su Qing's sound authority. But not now. Being only a 5-world smoldering god, it instantly caused blood to seep out of wounds all over his fleshly body. At that critical moment, his hands flashed in a double-handed incantation gesture, as he unleashed a divine ability to erase the authority. In doing so, he managed to break free of the area of explosive sound. Blood oozed out of the corners of his mouth. However, Su Qing's deadly sound just kept going. This time it came from the beating of his heart. His heartbeat was like heavenly thunder. His chest raged beyond his control, until it suddenly exploded. A boom echoed out. Blood spread out in all directions. Floating Fiend shivered, and his vision blurred. Pain filled him that was so intense it was difficult to put into words. At the same time, countless additional sounds arrived. He heard fish swishing their tails, sea beasts howling, and the sand grating against itself. It was the forbidden sea breathing. The sound converged, turning into a heaven-shaking, earth-shattering attack. Even the rumbling from before was added in. The booms became a tempest. They became killing intent. And in ghoulish fashion, they slammed into Floating Fiend's body and soul. He was surrounded by blood, and could hardly endure the pain in his soul. Eyes gleaming with madness, he tried to keep running. Over and over again, he unleashed his power of erasure to fight back. The effects were far from perfect. More blood built up. His fleshly body wounds became more severe. In the end, when he was just about ripped to shreds, he managed to break out of the area of sound. He was now in an area of complete silence. That only caused Floating Fiend's face to fall further. An intense sensation of deadly crisis overwhelmed him. That was because he knew that silence didn't mean safety. It meant the opposite. Silence meant that all the sound had been taken away. And taking away sound was something like omniscience. Without a scrap of hesitation, he activated the incomplete immortal skill seed within him. The price was even heavier before, but he managed to flee. A host of scintillating threads appeared, and he prepared to vanish. But then countless sounds exploded out along with that boundless power. Floating Fiend's threads had been violently suppressed. Rumbling booms echoed out as many of the threads collapsed before the others disappeared. A few breaths of time passed before Su Qing appeared in that spot, his face completely expressionless. He looked in the direction Floating Fiend had fled. "You can't get away," he said calmly. Then he lifted his foot and, in much the same way Floating Fiend had pursued him, gave chase. Chapter 994. Assimilating Floating Fiend. Deep beneath the surface of the Forbidden Sea, Floating Fiend was in horrible shape. His face was pale and his vision was so blurry he could barely see. He was even missing a leg. He had sustained a huge backlash from the immortal skill he had unleashed, as well as from Su Qing's sound authority. As a result, his leg had been severed from the depths of his soul out into his fleshly body. Intense pain flowed through him like tide waters, filling his entire body. As far as he could remember, he had only experienced pain like this when he was a low-level cultivator. After reaching Void Returning, he never felt such pain. And yet, despite having lost a leg to unleash the immortal skill, the sense of deadly crisis hadn't diminished in the least bit. Quite the opposite. It had sunk into the depths of his bones and grown increasingly intense along the way. After all, he now had only one leg left. And what was worse, at some point along the way, it had started decaying without him even noticing. The decay came from a hypertoxic poison and curse. It was Su Qing's godly authority of taboo poison. It was incomparably ferocious, and as it exploded through his body, his surviving leg was completely infected, and it seemed to be intent on filling his entire being, from his cultivation base to his fleshly body to his soul. As a result, his mind spun, and he had no choice but to put everything on the line by using his own essence to slow down the taboo poison and bolster his authority of erasure in the hopes of getting rid of it. Unfortunately, his cultivation base had declined, and he was in a very poor state. Add in the fact that he was being hunted, it ensured that he had no time for cultivation and no energy to dispel the poison. Damn it, damn it, damn it. Floating Fiend roared defiantly, his hair disheveled and his eyes filled with madness. He knew that he didn't have enough time, and therefore, he only had one thing left to do. His essence power erupted out with soul-severing force to cut off the lower half of himself, including his fleshly body. In an instant, his lower half exploded, turning into a cloud of poisoned blood. The upper half of him that remained looked incredibly weak, and his vision was so blurry he could hardly see a thing. The pain from his fleshly body and the agony from his soul combined to create an endless torment. All he could do was grit his teeth, try to stay conscious and keep fleeing. Unfortunately, he had no hope to latch onto, and no direction in which to flee. At this point, he wasn't even sure what he should do. Grief, bitterness, and a host of other negative emotions proliferated in him, growing more and more intense until Floating Fiend realized that something unusual was going on. By the time he realized it, it was too late. The negative emotions became uncontrollable thoughts that exploded within him, causing his blood to surge, and attracting violet moonlight from all directions. The light seemed to be off in the distance, but an instant later, it appeared within his blood and body, where it exploded. A scream of agony erupted from Floating Fiend's mouth, turning into the authority of sound, and another deadly attack. The taboo poison appeared again. It became a cycle of torment that assailed Floating Fiend as he desperately tried to flee. All he could do was keep chopping at his soul, all while continuing to use his incomplete immortal skill. Every teleportation resulted in him being ripped further into shreds. He lost his left arm. He lost his right arm. He lost his torso. In the end, all he had left was his head. It was like a convergence of misfortune, and the misfortune became drifting dust that fell down and covered his Dao heart. Within the dust was Su Qing's voice. Your patriarch has perished. Your people have died. Your body is being assimilated. Your species doesn't exist. As of now, you are the only vivifiant left in the revered ancient mainland. You failed to assimilate me, and thus lost your destined opportunity to become a summer immortal. Next time, going to assimilate you, I'm going to take away your authority of erasure. The voice thrummed with the godly authority of the violet moon. The echoing sound, combined with the invasion of the taboo poison, became a growing misfortune that covered Floating Fiend's Dao heart with blinding dust. A cracking sound echoed out in Floating Fiend's mind. Shut up! He screamed, trembling. His Dao heart had cracked. The opportunity has arrived, Su Qing said softly as he appeared in the water above Floating Fiend. A god had come. Boundless light emanated off of him, making him like a dazzling sun in the middle of the sea. Light spread in all directions. Incarnated as a sun, Su Qing illuminated the seafloor. Immortal light from the profound sun carried terrifying might and astonishing power, and all of it focused on Floating Fiend's surviving head. The previously pitch-black seafloor was now brightly lit. Screams of anguish and howls of grief poured out of Floating Fiend's mouth as the light shone down on him. Meanwhile, an intense rumbling sound expanded out from the sun. It turned into the only sound present, crushing out everything else. A pitch-black golden crow flew out from the sun. It grew larger and larger, and as the entire sea region trembled, the golden crow opened its mouth and unleashed a fire that could assimilate a myriad spirits. The fire intersected with the immortal light, covering Floating Fiend's head, and he was sucked into the mouth. Su Qing was going to assimilate Floating Fiend's authority. Normally speaking, that wouldn't have been an easy task for two reasons. First, Floating Fiend wasn't complete. Second, the difficulty level of assimilating an imperial sovereign's authority was astoundingly high. But he had sealed Floating Fiend's memories and authority in his head, and was using the boundless assimilation fire of the Golden Crow. The fire burned with great intensity. The first point of difficulty had been resolved. As for the second, well, Floating Fiend's cultivation base had already dropped. Furthermore, inside the Golden Crow was a convergence of fire as well as 5 blood mist hurricanes, which were made of the blood of Floating Fiend's entire species. The entire species had been assimilated. This was Golden Crow assimilates myriad spirits. The forbidden sea rumbled, the sky outside flashed with wild colors, and the clouds seethed. Countless lightning bolts crashed through the sky, and heavenly daos were visible overhead. Then, an authority aura unique to cultivators erupted within the Golden Crow. Next, the Golden Crow let loose a piercing cry as it sped toward Su Qing and entered into him through his right eye. Su Qing then closed his eyes. A few breaths of time passed. Then he opened his eyes, and intense rumbling sounds echoed out. His right eye now glittered with essence power, and a Dao lineament was visible there. The lineament's mere presence caused rumbling sounds to fill heaven and earth. It was the authority of erasure. That authority was unique to the cultivator system, and it was the only thing like it that Su Qing currently possessed. When it appeared, Su Qing shivered from head to toe. Immortal mercury flowed out all over him, turning into globs of silver liquid. The authority lineament also spread out. During the time in which Floating Fiend had chased him, Su Qing had exploded over and over again, and had lost a large quantity of immortal mercury. Later, his body was stitched back together, but he still lacked the immortal mercury, leaving his fleshly body in an inharmonious state that got worse on a daily basis. But now with this authority, the immortal mercury was back, spreading out from his right eye. The authority came from an imperial sovereign in the cultivator system. Immortal Mercury was also something from the cultivator system. In some respects, the two had the same origin. The latter was only useful as a temporary binding agent. Su Qing needed to quickly cultivate large amounts of immortal light to make his body complete and perfect. That was because the immortal Mercury was inherently an outside object and couldn't fully fuse with him. But now things were different. That authority was a replacement for the immortal Mercury. As a result, his body, which had the flesh of eminent desolation as its foundation, and had lineaments of authority, was being bathed in immortal light. It was being made much stronger. That sensation of near perfection which he had experienced appeared in his mind. His eyes shone. He knew his path, and that understanding was even more firmly set than before. The road behind him was flawless, and even if the road ahead had thorns and thistles to overcome, he was confident he could tread it to completion. As that occurred, supernatural phenomena appeared in the sky over the Forbidden Sea. Heavenly douse of revered ancient appeared. Intense rumbling echoed out, and ripples spread through heaven and earth. It was accurate to say that there were thousands of bright colors and boundless auspicious light. It was an offering of congratulations from revered ancient. The scene immediately attracted the attention of numerous groups on the Forbidden Sea. Everyone was shaken deeply. The vast majority of those who noticed didn't realize the significance of what they were seeing. However, the heir apparent and his siblings were shaken to the core. An offering of congratulations from revered ancient. According to the legends, the only thing that could cause revered ancient to offer congratulations would be the appearance of an unprecedented talent that hasn't been seen from ancient times until now. As the heir apparent and his siblings were moved, the Empress observed the situation with shining eyes. Su Qing acquired authority while still in void returning. Presumably, that was the true goal of that master of his. The Empress looked thoughtfully in the direction of South Phoenix. In South Phoenix, in a private chamber in the 7th peak of Seven Blood Eyes, was Master Seventh, who had been in seclusion ever since forming a new body for Su Qing. He opened his eyes. Fourth Sib has not let me down at all. He managed to take that authority away, and is using its power to replace the immortal Mercury. That authority of erasure is the perfect complement for his current fleshly body state. It looks like I have one less thing to worry about. Now next on the list is... Master Seventh slowly looked up, and his gaze pierced through the dome of heaven and into the starry sky. It passed the holy lands that were whizzing toward revered ancient, and eventually reached a statue with a terrifying aura. Master Seventh suddenly looked very serious. Such a familiar aura. Master? Are you the one that's returning? A bitter smile appeared on his face. Time passed. A few days later, news about the eradication of the vivifiant Holy Land spread through revered ancient. Numerous organizations were surprised by the news. And of course, it was a deep shock to the other Holy Lands. But then something even more shocking happened. Dharmic decrees were issued by humankind and the Fire Moon Dark Heavens. Combined, they formed the most paramount will possible in revered ancient. The vivifiant Holy Land had evil intentions, and they committed two heinous crimes. Their first crime was using the guise of benevolence to parasitize many species on the Forbidden Sea. It was an act devoid of conscience, and would lead anyone to bristle with anger. The evidence is incontrovertible. Their second crime was that they conspired against the imperial tutor of humankind, who is also the Grand Dark Heaven of the Fire Moons. Their entire species endorsed this vile, atrocious act, and were more than happy to protect the perpetrator. They had no intention of ever changing, and enjoyed watching the imperial tutor being tormented. The perpetrator's intentions were worthy of the death penalty, his actions were worthy of the death penalty, and his species was worthy of the death penalty. From the moment the Holy Lands arrived, we here in revered ancient were careful to uphold peace and harmony. We never intended to wage war. But the actions of the Holy Lands have been ruthless, unrestrained, and tyrannical. As the saying goes, the falling of one leaf heralds the coming of autumn. In order to ensure that no similar crimes are perpetrated, we hereby notify all Holy Lands in the east of revered ancient that they have 3 days to leave. In 3 days, any who remain behind will be considered enemies of the east. Chapter 995. A Light-Eating God. It was the 5th day after the Empress issued the Dermic decree. It was a bright sunny day with no clouds in the sky. Early morning light shone down on the port of Seven Blood Eyes. The port was busy, with both cultivators and mortals bustling about everywhere. There were also non-humans from various islands on the sea, there to do business. Seven Blood Eyes was now a powerhouse entity, with influence that spread far out into the sea. Countless islands and species were willing to be subsidiary forces of the sect. Products from all over the continent of South Phoenix ended up in the Seven Blood Eyes port district, where they would then be carried out near and far by merchant ships. At the same time, the port at Emperor Receiving Prefecture collected products from all over Revered Ancient and ferried them to South Phoenix. High-level cultivators didn't participate in activities like that. The responsibilities were all handled by low-level cultivators. Those people formed the massive foundation that allowed the sect to grow strong and train new disciples. Dharma boats and non-human watercraft came in and out constantly, to the point where ships had to line up outside of the port before they could get a spot inside. Despite how busy everything was, everything operated in perfect order. Everything went so smoothly that the sect departments of Seven Blood Eyes who saw to public safety and order didn't actually have a lot of work to do. That was especially true of the Violent Crimes Division. Normally, the constables from there seemed very kind and amiable. That said, to non-humans, the disciples who wore the uniforms of the Violent Crimes Division were to be deeply feared. The non-humans knew that the kindness of the constables was nothing more than an act. In reality, they were all profound schemers, and within their smiles and laughter were hidden sharp blades. That could be attested to by the corpses of the various criminals who had been executed over the years as Seven Blood Eyes rose to prominence. And of course, the older generation of non-humans all talked about things they had witnessed from the time they were young. According to them, it used to be that only the disciples of the 7th peak acted like that. The other peaks were different. But nowadays, the Violent Crimes Divisions in all of the peaks acted exactly the same way. In fact, if you took everything in as a whole, you would find that such behavior wasn't limited to the Violent Crimes Divisions. Disciples from all of the mountain peaks in Seven Blood Eyes now acted the way that only 7th peak disciples used to act. It had become something of a common practice. These people are extremely crafty. That was what everyone said. But there was nothing they could do about that. No one dared to offend Seven Blood Eyes, and when it came to the Violent Crimes Divisions, that was even more the case. The reason was that someone who was an exalted figure in the east of Revered Ancient had come to the Violent Crimes Division recently. There wasn't a single individual in the islands of the Forbidden Sea who didn't know who this person was. In fact, the east of Revered Ancient had been thrown into a buzz of activity recently because of him. Stories about him were told everywhere. You could even say that just mentioning his name on the Forbidden Sea would cause any species to go completely silent. He was that important and powerful. The non-humans feared him, but in the Violent Crimes Divisions of the various peaks of Seven Blood Eyes, he was virtually worshipped like a god. After all, he had started out in the Violent Crimes Division. This god of the Violent Crimes Division currently sat cross-legged in the pavilion which had once belonged to Master Seventh. He was doing breathing exercises as the sun rose. Every breath he took caused scintillating light to converge from the rising sun and enter his mouth as if it were food. It became crystalline motes within Su Qing, motes that spread through his body, nourishing his profound sun-immortal light. As he sat, in the shimmering light eating the sunlight, his body shone with dazzling brightness. He had a long violet robe as well as violet hair, with spectacularly beautiful facial features and a body to match. Anyone who saw him would be unable to stop from sighing at the perfection they were witnessing. Erniu sat in the same building. Glancing at Su Qing, he sighed and turned to his second junior sister and Huang Yan. With a face like that, he could live such a great life. I mean, he could practice dual cultivation with a god. But instead he sits around working hard all day. Just what I would expect of my little junior brother. He's doing things exactly the way I did back in the day. Second junior sister ignored him. However, Huang Yan's eyebrows shot up. Erniu, did you lose something? Erniu looked very pleased with himself. Presumably you're trying to say that I lost some face, eh? You're trying to imply that I'm shameless? Come on, don't be so petty, second brother-in-law. Huang Yan glared at him. Erniu's shifty manner made it a struggle not to deliver a vicious slap to his face. Erniu glared back. Down at the bottom of the sea, he had been quite scared of Huang Yan. But now he was home, and his junior sister was around, so he wasn't feeling as afraid. The two of them glared at each other so intensely sparks were about to start flying. That was when second junior sister frowned. "That's enough, you two." Huang Yan immediately smiled obsequiously, all while Ernie preened proudly. Second sib knew she couldn't do much about her eldest brother. Therefore, she decided to change the conversation topic. "It's been 2 days since the Holy Lands left the East. Until more Holy Lands show up, we're going to have some temporary peace and quiet. However, based on what Patriarch Vivifiant said before he died, there's war on the horizon. I'm afraid it's unavoidable. Considering Master is in seclusion, eldest brother, have you put any thought into how 7 Blood Eyes should prepare?" "Of course I have," Ernie said, licking his lips. "That stingy Empress only gave us half of the resources from the Vivifiant Holy Land. And she took the entire mountain. That's pushing things too far. We could have taken that mountain and forged it into a really powerful weapon. Therefore, my plan is to write a strongly worded letter, signed in the name of 7 Blood Eyes and the old man, demanding that the Empress give the mountain back to us." Having said that, Ernie's eyes shone brightly. Huang Yan looked at him, blinking a few times. He had to admit it was an interesting idea. As for second sib, she thought about it for a moment and was about to reply when her transmission jade slip vibrated. Picking it up, she scanned the message and then looked at Su Qing. "Little junior brother, someone spotted the bronze dragon chariot you were looking for." The dazzling light surrounding the cross-legged Su Qing rippled, and then he sucked it all into his mouth and opened his eyes. The lineament of authority in his right eye glittered, becoming a terrifying pressure that affected the local natural and magical laws, causing the sky overhead to dim. After the fight with Floating Fiend, Su Qing had returned and spent all of his time getting used to the authority of erasure. He didn't have any spare time to look for the chariot. That said, he knew that the chariot was somewhere in the inner sea. Therefore, he had posted a mission for 7 Blood Eyes disciples to report any sightings of the chariot. Today he finally got some results. Standing, Su Qing looked at his second elder sister. "You might recognize the disciples who found it," she said. She waved her hand, sending a jade slip flying over to him. "Many thanks," he said as he caught the jade slip. After scanning it with divine will, he turned in the direction of the Forbidden Sea and took a step. Ernie jumped up laughing. "I'll come along, little junior brother. I can be your Dharma protector." He also took a step forward, and together he and Su Qing vanished. "Dharma protector, my ass," Huang Yan said with a cold snort. He looked over at his elder sister. Second elder sister nodded, and Huang Yan brightened up. Jumping to his feet, he raced after Su Qing and Ernie. Out on the Forbidden Sea, a giant was plodding along, its upper half above the surface of the water. Its every movement caused tsunami waves to race out in all directions. Some distance away, a Dharma ship bobbed up and down in the water. Occasionally, waves would crash over it, but it maintained its course as it kept pace with the giant. There were 3 cultivators aboard the ship, all of whom wore the uniforms of the 7 Blood Eyes Violent Crimes Division. In the lead position was a young man with long black hair that flowed past his shoulders and down his back. He pulsed with a violent aura, and his eyes looked like those of a wild beast. They were full of coldness toward the world and apathy toward life. Behind him were 2 middle-aged men who seemed rather ordinary. None of them had weak cultivation bases. That was especially true of the fierce young man, who was in the great circle of core formation, only about half a step from nascent soul. All of them were constables from the Violent Crimes Division, and all had rather high ranks. In fact, the young man was the current director of the 7th Peak's Violent Crimes Division. Normally speaking, there were few missions which were important enough for him to leave the division. But a few days ago, he saw Su Qing's mission regarding the dragon chariot. Without any hesitation, he took his 2 deputy directors out to sea. The director held nothing back. He searched even the most dangerous locations and by chance happened to spot the giant. Given the level of their cultivation bases, they were still having trouble standing up to the pressure despite how far away they were. The giant's terrifying aura caused all 3 of them to tremble instinctively. And yet the young man with black hair was unusually capable, and he kept his teeth gritted to endure. The fact he was going all out made the two deputy directors think about all of the stories and legends they had heard about this director. Before taking up his office, the director had been a mute. He had been a fanatical killer, and had, on more than one occasion, ripped people to shreds like a wild animal. Every single one of his enemies ended up torn to pieces in the most brutal manner imaginable. After becoming the director, his cultivation base grew, and he eventually was able to start speaking. That said, he never said much. And he grew even more fierce and strong. Over the years, he had tracked down virtually every wanted criminal there was. The process had ensured that the director's name became well known and feared among the species of the Forbidden Sea. There were also rumors that the director was a follower of Su Qing. Some people claimed to have witnessed that with their own eyes, but there were also those who said such stories were complete nonsense. Because Su Qing had been gone for so long, the stories gradually became nothing more than rumors. But when the two deputy directors saw how their director was risking his life for this mission, they started to think that the rumors might be true after all. Thus, they trembled with fear as they held on for the time it takes an incense stick to burn. Around that time, the giant gradually sank back down beneath the surface of the water. That caused the tsunami waves to grow even larger, and the power of the sea caused cracks to spread out over the Dharma ship. It looked like it might fall apart at any moment. But the young man with black hair didn't give up. He almost seemed suicidal as he tapped into his cultivation base to control the Dharma ship. At the same time, he sent his special senses out and locked onto the giant so he wouldn't lose it. As time ticked by, blood started oozing out of his eyes, ears, nose, and mouth. But he didn't relax at all. More time passed. The tsunamis grew even more intense, and whirlpools started forming, which tugged violently at the Dharma ship and caused more cracks to appear. At one point, a massive whirlpool swept right toward the Dharma ship, causing it to tremble violently. Loud cracking sounds started echoing out. The two deputy directors were completely scared out of their minds, and were crying out loudly. But then, a sound like heavenly thunder echoed out. The sound entered the surface of the water, merging with the sound of the tsunamis, and resulted in a tranquil voice. Calm. Chapter 996. Reliving the myth. It was only one word, but in the blink of an eye, it became an order that had to be followed. Gentleness descended. The tsunami waves died down, leading to absolute calm. The whirlpools disappeared without a trace, somehow suppressed by some mysterious power. That specific word, calm, referred to the sea becoming calm. As of this moment, the breeze went still, and everything became completely placid. On the Dharma ship, the two deputy directors shivered as they looked up. What they saw high in the sky was a trio of dazzling figures approaching. All of them had seen Huang Yan before. As for the rather ordinary-looking person next to Huang Yan, they had seen depictions of him before, but couldn't quite place who he was. But the moment they saw the violet figure in the lead, their hearts burst with excitement. Fourth Highness. Fourth Highness was the special form of address that 7th Peak disciples used for Su Qing. The moment the two deputy directors spoke, the young man with the black hair, whose cold eyes were uncharacteristically emotional in this moment, dropped to his knees to kowtow. Mute? Su Qing said gently as he looked at the young man with black hair. The young man's emotions surged with more intensity. He looked up. No, milord. The rumors about him were true. After joining Seven Blood Eyes, he hadn't felt much sense of belonging in the sect. However, he felt completely differently when it came to Su Qing. Originally, he was scared of Su Qing. Then Su Qing saved him and later on pointed out a path for him to follow. And when he experienced difficulty in Foundation establishment, it was Su Qing who brought him back from the brink of disaster. 1. Su Qing had always been like a lamp for him to follow. He had always been trying to walk in Su Qing's footprints and prove his loyalty. That was because he had been raised by wild dogs and had developed that type of personality. Su Qing's eyes were soft as he studied the mute. Then he said, "Your cultivation base is doing well. You've been working hard these past years." To the mute, such words were the highest praise possible, and they filled him with excitement. "Thank you for helping me find the dragon chariot," Su Qing continued. "Just wait here for me." He looked away from the mute and dropped down into the sea. He soon appeared on the seafloor, right in front of the giant and the dragon chariot. The giant continued walking, the chains slung over his shoulder taut as they dragged the chariot along the seafloor, leaving huge gullies behind. "We meet again." Su Qing's eyes shone with anticipation, yet he didn't take action immediately. Instead, he followed along and waited for the right moment. When day departed and night arrived, darkness spread. The night passed. When dawn was about to break, "Now's the time." Su Qing waved his right hand, and the severed hand of the musician appeared in front of him. As the hand's fingers danced, natural sounds "Welcome the Moon" drifted out across the seafloor. The giant stopped in place and turned its head, its vacant eye sockets seemingly looking at the hand, and it was apparently listening. Without any hesitation, Su Qing burst into motion. Whether it was his past experiences or his recent analyses, he was confident in achieving his aim here. Moving at top speed, he shot past the giant. He encountered no obstruction. The giant let Su Qing pass, as it was seemingly completely focused on natural sounds "Welcome the Moon." And thus, Su Qing rapidly got closer and closer to the chariot. Years ago, he had only been able to stay in the chariot for a brief moment. On this, his return, he directly entered the dilapidated chariot and, without the slightest hesitation, sat down on the chair within the chariot. The moment he sat, the chariot trembled, and the giant stirred as if to turn and look over its shoulder. But then the golden crow manifested outside of Su Qing, letting loose a piercing cry. It also sent a sea of flames out around the dragon chariot. Su Qing simultaneously used the profound sun immortal light to bolster the golden crow. The golden crow radiated dazzling light. From a distance, Su Qing in the chariot no longer looked like a cultivator, but rather like a sun. At the same time, he sent his god perception out, and unleashed his god source to control the musician's hand and make the song even more impassioned. The giant shivered. Under the inspiration of natural sounds "Welcome the Moon," it already seemed inclined to follow orders. But then the golden crow aura from the dragon chariot appeared, tapping into instincts that hadn't stirred for countless years. Those two instincts erupted within the giant. Su Qing, who was paying very close attention, noticed that immediately, and his eyes burned. This was the moment he had been waiting for. According to the mythological story, after the golden crow returned to the palace and listened to natural sounds "Welcome the moon would rise. The music would play through the night. When the music ceased, the moon would return to the palace, and the golden crow would sit in the chariot and rise over revered ancient. And now, as the giant struggled instinctively, the light of dawn filled the outside world. And then the severed hand song reached its conclusion. The music vanished. Up on the surface, Ernyu reclined on the deck of the mute's dharma ship, humming a little tune. Huang Yan sat at the prow yawning. The two deputy directors from the Violent Crimes Division were still feeling very excited as they sat to the side looking at Ernyu and Huang Yan. The mute was at the stern, looking down into the water. The sky was pitch black. Eventually dawn broke, and light slowly filled the dome of heaven. The light started out at the seafloor, and then broke through the surface like a host of innumerable blades, before shining into the sky. Ernyu stopped humming. Huang Yan's eyes gleamed, and then an enormous giant burst out of the water, creating a massive wave as it shot upward. As it strode up, chains stretched out behind it. Then, an even larger wave surged out as an extremely ancient bronze dragon chariot was pulled off the seafloor by the giant. After tens of thousands of years, it was again rising into the sky. Su Qing sat in the chariot, surrounded by the manifestation of the golden crow, as well as an endless sea of flames and scintillating immortal light. "Holy crap," Ernyu said, his eyes widening excitedly. He hadn't been aware of Su Qing's plan, as Su Qing hadn't explained it to him. He had assumed Su Qing wanted the chariot for cultivation purposes, and could never have guessed that he would ride the chariot into the sky. Ernyu inhaled sharply. He's reliving the myth? Huang Yan's reaction was completely different. He had been aware of Su Qing's goal all along, and right now, his expression was very serious, the reason being that Su Qing wasn't the only thing he saw in the chariot. He also saw a blurry figure in front of Su Qing staring out at heaven and earth. That figure was a young man who looked simultaneously like a god and an emperor. Brilliant heaven god folk. Crown Prince Golden Crow. revered ancient was being filled with light. Chapter 997. The Sun Tours Patrolling the World. Revered ancient was massive. It covered such a huge area that, before the broken face arrived, it had a total of 37 suns, all of which were different, whether in terms of the materials they were made of, their origin, or their characteristics. They all had their own stories and secrets. But among them, there was one set of sun and moon that were especially unique. There was one legend that claimed that countless years in the past, back when the brilliant heaven godfolk ruled revered ancient, there were actually only 36 suns. It was the same with the moons. Eventually, when war broke out between the immortals and the gods, the immortals hoisted a new sun and a new moon up over revered ancient. According to the legend, that sun and moon actually came from the brilliant heaven godfolk. After the brilliant heaven godfolk were defeated and suppressed, the summer immortals permitted a few of them to continue living in revered ancient. They had to abide by a treaty, though, which required them to patrol the world of revered ancient. One of those gods was the crown prince of the brilliant heaven godfolk, whose name was Golden Crow, and whose mission it was to patrol the daytime. 1. As for the moon, its name was Night Watch. Representing kindness, innocence, and the purity of life, the moon's mission was to patrol the night. The sun and moon rose and set, and over the years, they were never able to reunite. It was only on rare occasions when they rose at the same time that they could see each other. What they illuminated wasn't specifically the revered ancient mainland, but instead the mysterious outer sea. And thus time passed. Heaven and earth changed. The power of time cleansed the histories. As generations of cultivators came and went, and more species came to exist in revered ancient, the old stories about the suns and moons grew vague and unclear. Then the broken face arrived. For differing reasons, more than half of the 37 suns perished, until there were only 17 left. As for the stories about the suns and moons, they became even more watered down, until it was hard for people to determine what was legend and what was mere fiction. People just knew that the 17 suns were randomly scattered across revered ancient, with some of them being close to each other, and others being very far away. That was why some parts of revered ancient were stuck in never-ending night, while others existed in non-stop daylight. As for the mysterious outer sea, there was no light there, as that location had lost its sun and moon. The continent of South Phoenix plus the Holy Tide region and the two regions which were next to it ended up being somewhat lucky. The sun that existed there was one that hadn't perished tens of thousands of years ago. It was still there. That sun would rise at dawn and provide illumination and warmth for the many living beings in the area. For countless years that had never changed and came to be taken for granted. It was still the same even now. However, this particular dawn was more special than those in the past. This dawn was brighter and warmer. Because the living people in the area were so used to the normal state of affairs, when something out of the ordinary happened, they were able to sense it immediately. That came as pure instinct. It was the same with cultivators and mortals alike, including non-humans and animals. When that unusual brightness filled the sky, non-humans, cultivators, mortals, and beasts everywhere looked up into the sky. All living beings were shocked to the core, and were left trembling in heart and body. Astonishment, incredulity, disbelief, all sorts of emotions erupted within them. And that was because in the sky over South Phoenix, the Holy Tide region, the South Isle region, and all the countless islands in the sea, all of a sudden had two suns. Heaven and earth were illuminated with brilliant light. Thanks to the illumination of two suns, the pitch-black forbidden sea seemed emerald. The ships moving about on the waters as dawn broke stopped moving as those on board looked up into the sky in astonishment. Mortals spontaneously dropped down in worship. The mute and the two deputy directors were shaken to the core. Ernia's gasp rang out loud for everyone to hear. Huang Yin looked very serious. As everyone looked on, the decaying giant strode forth into the sky, dragging the bronze dragon chariot behind in a dazzling display. It was like a ball of fire, the essence of light, an enormous sun. That act of rising was the dawn itself. Within the boundless light and heat was Su Qing in the chariot. His mind was an ethereal blank, his thoughts completely focused on the incarnation of Golden Crow, who was once again patrolling the world. Inside the chariot, the carvings of Golden Crow assimilates myriad spirits seemed to come alive, and began flowing and glowing. Eventually, they converged into a blurry form with its back to Su Qing, standing somberly in the chariot. That figure was the very same young man that Huang Yan had spotted. Su Qing could now see the figure as well. His mind reeled as the Golden Crow projection around him shimmered, and the legacy of Golden Crow himself created a resonance between him and the other figure in the chariot. Su Qing felt loneliness and sorrow. He sensed thoughts. The loneliness came from an incredibly long life. The sorrow came from the fall of a species. The thoughts were connections to Night Watch. Without even realizing it, Su Qing sent his own thoughts inside, until he eventually heard a faint sigh. The centaurs patrolling the world. The giant pulling the chariot shivered as light from the chariot flowed out. The chariot became golden, like a war chariot bursting with power. The light flowed over the giant, turning into golden armor, and causing the giant's aura to become holy. The giant looked up, and its vacant eye sockets were filled with light. Then it howled a howl that echoed out through the sky as it walked in the direction of the outer sea. As everyone watched, the sun which had just emerged changed directions and sped away from the inner sea. As it neared, the darkness of the outer sea trembled. After tens of thousands of years, it was finally seeing light. The light landed on the surface of the sea, and it was hard to tell if it was a reflection or the original color of the sea water, but it was violet. Golden Crow sped through the sky over the outer sea, filling it with light. Where the chariot went, daylight came, driving away the darkness and gloom, and bringing clarity to the outer sea. The sea water there was originally pitch black, viscous, and incredibly buoyant. There were few waves there. The surface of the water was covered with ancient flotsam and jetsam. There were boulders, huge corpses, mysterious temple ruins, and the like. There were huge eyes that floated around like islands. There was a terrifying godly might that filled the water. There were vast, unknown entities the size of entire prefectures, standing on the surface of the water and staring up into the dome of heaven. They were looking at the sun that had once patrolled the world. Time passed. The giant dragged the chariot through the sky over the outer sea until midday, when the sunlight was the brightest. At that point, the giant slowed to a stop. Countless hidden gazes and streams of divine will rose from the outer sea to bear witness. A moment passed, and then the figure standing in the chariot in front of Su Qing slowly turned around. He looked at Su Qing. When the gaze hit Su Qing, his mind spun. Countless pieces of information slammed into him like furious waves. This was a legacy. This was the true legacy from Golden Crow. The Golden Crow projection around Su Qing glittered brightly. The young man closed his eyes. The giant outside of the chariot let loose a roar of grief, and then began the return trip. As the dragon chariot made its way off into the distance, the greedy darkness returned. The void created by the chariot was filled in. Eventually evening fell, and the dragon chariot left the outer sea. The outer sea was pitch black once again. The giant's golden suit of armor gradually faded away, and the giant once again had a decaying fleshly body. The dragon chariot's light faded, and it once again became dilapidated. Evening faded away. Ernyu and Huang Yan saw the giant returning to the inner sea, step by step, its aura of death pulsing. The bronze dragon chariot came with it. When it entered the water, a gentle force emerged from the chariot, sending out Su Qing, who was in the middle of accepting the legacy. The chariot sank to the bottom. The giant started pulling again, and an illusory palace appeared from within time on the seafloor. Outside of the palace, the giant stopped moving and knelt. A blurry young man stepped out of the chariot and walked into the palace. He walked very slowly, as if each step was full of sorrow. Upon reaching the highest point in the palace, the young man sat down in the chair there. Time glittered around him as the musicians appeared, and natural sounds welcome the moon drifted out. As the beautiful music played, the young man's head bowed. Sadly, as the music played, there was no moon named Night Watch that appeared above. The forbidden sea. The loneliness became eternal. It overwhelmed the song. It overwhelmed time. And the palace once again began to blur. The walls crumbled and it turned into ruins. It became a tomb. Outside the tomb was the giant, who wept in grief. Up on the surface, on the mute's dharma ship, Su Qing was seated cross-legged. The mute stood by, guarding him, his heart full of vigilance. It didn't matter who was present. The mute was on guard against them. The two deputy directors from the 7th Peak's Violent Crimes Division were visibly shaken. They looked at Su Qing like he was a deity. What had happened that day surpassed anything they understood or could imagine. They had heard stories about the dragon chariot, but neither of them could ever have guessed that someone could sit inside of it and become a sun, then participate in the sunrise and sunset. It was so mind-blowing to them that they could hardly breathe. Erniu and Huang Yan couldn't take their eyes off Su Qing. That was especially true of Erniu. Su Qing's actions had left him flabbergasted, and of course he was extremely curious to find out how Su Qing had benefited. Huang Yan wasn't curious about how Su Qing had benefited, but he did have some questions about Crown Prince Golden Crow, though he was waiting to ask Su Qing later. At a certain point, his serious expression flickered, and he suddenly looked off toward the horizon. A red glow had appeared in the night sky. The glow spread, invading the darkness and turning the sky crimson. It was the same with the sea as well. It turned into something like a sea of blood. The red light converged to form a god. The god approached and stepped onto the Dharma ship. Instantly, the mute and the two deputy directors fell unconscious. A blood wind blew, stirring the god's red garments and his long hair. He seemed bizarrely handsome to Huang Yan and Erniu. Erniu's eyes narrowed, and he looked surprised. Rising in what seemed like a casual movement, he happened to place himself between the god and Su Qing. Clasping hands, he bowed. "What a surprise to see you here, Senior. No wonder I sensed all the glory in heaven and earth fading away. As it turns out, you were on the way, sir." Huang Yan said nothing, but he did start pulsing with terrifying fluctuations, and his expression was very serious. Yu Luqian laughed softly. "You don't need to get all anxious. I came because Su Qing owes me a favor." Sitting down cross-legged, He waved his hand. A bamboo table appeared, along with 4 teacups. After pouring the tea, He picked up a cup, took a sip, and looked at Erniu and Huang Yan. "Drink." Chapter 998. Yu Liuqian's Favor. Yu Liuqian's arrival caused an invisible force to spread out through the dome of heaven and the forbidden sea. The sky went still. So did the sea. The waves seemed to just stop in place, maintaining their form but not moving. The current simply froze in place. It made everything seem like a painting describing an unknown story. But then the god in that story extended an invitation. Erniu could be sarcastic, but there was no way he would dare to refuse Yu Liuqian's tea. He had witnessed Yu Liuqian tell a story about Floating Fiend. It had started with a refusal to drink tea, and then everything got twisted, and Floating Fiend got yanked back and forth in the most miserable way imaginable. In the end, he collapsed mentally. This guy looks like a typical god, but according to the rumors I've heard, all the other gods call him petty. Plus, He has a weird quirk. The more people don't want to do something, the more He likes to force them to do it. Besides, what's out there that my stomach can't digest? I'm not afraid of this joker. With such thoughts on his mind, he unhesitatingly reached out, took a teacup and drank. Eyes lighting up as if he had just consumed the most amazing delicacy. He sighed in admiration. Now that's some good tea. Delicious. Off to the side, Huang Yan remained stony-faced, and didn't so much as touch the teacup. Yu Liuqian's eyes narrowed as He glanced at Huang Yan. It was impossible to tell what He was thinking, but He ultimately chuckled softly. Looking away from Huang Yan, He focused on the meditating Su Qing. Addressing Su Qing, He said, "Look, buddy, I can tell that you're actually awake and just pretending to be unaware of your surroundings. It actually reminds me of a tale I happen to know, the protagonist of which is named Su Qing. Want me to tell the story?" When Su Qing heard the word story mentioned, he immediately opened his eyes. A golden crow flew out from his eyes, sending out dazzling fire into the becalmed sea and sky. As it circled overhead, it let loose a crisp, clear cry. It flew higher and higher until it was as high as it could fly in the sky. There it shivered, and the fire surrounding it grew more intense, sending out such explosive light and heat that it was like an incarnated sun. An ancient aura pulsed out from it, the pressure of a god. There were also 10 beams of immortal light that surrounded the golden crow. That was none other than Su Qing's profound sun immortal light. Originally, it had consisted of 1 beam of light, but now there were 10. The 10 dazzling beams of immortal light combined with the golden crow, bolstering it, and making it seem even more like a sun. The night was being burned away. Then the crow flew back into Su Qing's eyes and vanished. The sky went dark again. However, Su Qing's eyes now shone like suns. Rising to his feet, he bowed at the waist to Yu Luqian. Su Qing had been more than willing to listen to a story about Floating Fiend as told by Yu Luqian. But he didn't dare to listen to a story about himself. Therefore, he needed to show some good manners. "I'm very interested in Golden Crow's story," Yu Luqian said with a smile. Su Qing didn't say anything at first. Golden Crow's legacy was far too majestic, and also infinitely complex. It wasn't something he could truly comprehend in a short period of time. It would have to remain in his sea of consciousness as he slowly absorbed it. And until it was fully absorbed, Golden Crow's story would not be complete. Yu Luqian obviously knew that. Su Qing thought for a moment, then said, "If you want to hear the story, senior, I can oblige." Yu Luqian shook his head and put his teacup down. An incomplete story will contain too many uncertainties, and that would affect the quality. I'd rather wait until you know every final detail. Of course, I'm not asking to hear the story for free. We can discuss the details when the time comes. Now you owe me a favor, and you're going to repay it by being bait. In short order, you'll be coming with me on a quick trip to the outer sea. Su Qing considered what it meant for Yu Luqian to talk of bait and the outer sea. It was already causing some puzzle pieces to click together. After a few breaths of time passed, he looked at Yu Luqian. "Senior, do you mind being a bit clearer?" Yu Luqian smiled faintly. "I want to go on a fishing expedition." Huang Yan stood, his eyes flashing. Yu Luqian turned to look at him with a serious expression, then projected a message to Huang Yan using divine will. Huang Yan frowned. "Eyes still flashing," he said. "I'll respect Su Qing's decision." Su Qing thought about it for a moment. When in Golden Crow's dragon chariot, he had visited the outer sea, and though he still didn't understand much about it, he could tell it was a dangerous place. That said, he wasn't the same person he had been in the past. That was especially true now that he had Golden Crow's legacy, which meant that he did have some level of understanding about the place. As long as he was careful, going there wasn't out of the question. Most importantly, he did owe a favor to Yu Luqian. "Right now?" Su Qing asked. "Right now." With a smile and a nod, Yu Luqian stood. "Let's go." With that, he strode up into the sky. Su Qing took a deep breath. Huang Yan frowned. "Su Qing, I'm not going to interfere with your decision. But if you don't want to do this, just tell me. I'll think of something." Su Qing shook his head. "Senior Yu Luqian saved me, and I have to pay back that favor." He had his principles. He didn't forget grudges. But at the same time, he didn't forget favors. Su Qing strode up into the sky to join Yu Luqian. Huang Yan could see that Su Qing had made up his mind, so he said nothing further. When Erniu saw that Su Qing and Yu Luqian were about to leave, he blinked a few times, cleared his throat, and then plastered a flattering smile onto his face. "Well," he said loudly, "since I can't be of any help, I guess I won't be going along. Senior little junior brother, I wish you speedy success. And now I'll be off." With that, Erniu prepared to send the Dharma ship racing away, as if he didn't want to be involved in any capacity. Up in midair, Yu Luqian looked down at Erniu. "If you want to come along, Nyo, or you can just say so. There's no need to play with words." Erniu shook his head, slapped himself on the chest, and loudly proclaimed, "You misunderstand, senior. I'm not going. I'm absolutely positively not going. In fact, even if you beat the crap out of me, I still wouldn't go." Yu Luqian's eyebrows shot up, and he smiled enigmatically. "I suppose that means that if I don't beat the crap out of you, you will go? Since you want to go that much, then fine. Adding some extra bait to the fishing line sounds like a great idea." He waved his right hand, and Erniu floated up next to Su Qing. Then Yu Luqian strode forward, and the redness in the sky shrank down, converging into the form of a red cloud that shot off toward the outer sea. On the Dharma ship, Huang Yan watched silently as the red cloud disappeared in the distance. High in the sky, inside the red cloud, Erniu was scowling on the verge of tears. That said, based on what Su Qing knew of his eldest brother, he could tell that he was secretly very pleased with himself. "You can stop it with the act," Yu Luqian said. "I was going to bring you along as bait regardless of what you said. As long as the two of you don't have a death wish, this little situation will be dangerous but not fatal. It would have been better if I hadn't said anything at all." Su Qing suddenly started feeling very uneasy and couldn't help but glance at Erniu. When it came to death wishes, if Erniu could be said to take second place in all of existence, then there couldn't be a person in first place. When Erniu saw Su Qing looking at him that way, he felt a bit guilty. He cleared his throat. Senior, in order to make this the best fishing expedition possible, and in order to make sure you profit handsomely, then maybe you could explain all the details of the mission. If you don't, sir, well, it's not as if our 2 lives are important, but it would be truly heartbreaking if your great plan went south. Su Qing looked in the direction the red cloud was traveling. He had been thinking of saying the same thing Erniu had just said. After all, knowing the details of the mission would make things a lot safer. Yu Luqian knew exactly what they were thinking. He laughed softly. Considering He had come to accept repayment of a favor from Su Qing, it wouldn't make sense for him to hold things back. Besides, the mission at hand was extremely important to him. Thus, as the red cloud sped on its way, his voice echoed into the ears of Su Qing and Erniu. Before getting into the mission, I need to explain a bit about the Outer Sea. It's a very mysterious and unfathomable place, with a history that goes back farther than the brilliant heaven godfolk. Although not even I know much about those times. What's more, there are many dangers there that not even my god perception can detect. As far as I can tell, the brilliant heaven godfolk probably came from the Outer Sea. It's the origin of their species. It was only after emerging from the sea that they established brilliant heaven. Later, though the progenitors of you cultivators crushed and sealed the brilliant heaven godfolk, and built the revered ancient mainland atop brilliant heaven, they could never do anything about the Outer Sea. My guess is that the reason Crown Prince Golden Crow was left behind with authority to patrol the world had nothing to do with strength or power. Rather, it was because of bloodline. The Outer Sea is essentially a unique, standalone world. Yu Luqian's words contain profound information that few people in the world were privy to. Su Qing and Erniu were both shaken deeply by what they were hearing. Now, as for this mission of mine, Yu Luqian trailed off and stopped talking for a moment. Su Qing, do you understand the difference between cultivators and gods? Su Qing was still trying to digest the previous information. After thinking for a moment, he replied, immortals cultivate essence. Gods cultivate omniscience. Yu Luqian laughed. You're right, but you're also wrong. The correct answer is this. Immortals cultivate a true ego, while gods cultivate a true name. That's why some immortals can perish, but true gods are undying. If a true god is killed, it doesn't matter, as long as their true name circulates in the starry sky. After enough years pass, they will return. Of course, what will return is that god, but at the same time isn't. Yu Luqian's voice contained something very ancient within it. As it vanished into the surrounding cloud, Su Qing and Erniu looked at him standing in front of them. His eyes were focused on the Outer Sea, while his voice seemed to come from within ancient time itself. Your revered ancient has a history full of war. Your progenitors who came from the lower worlds defeated the brilliant heaven godfolk here. Although I didn't participate in that war, I've seen it within the time of revered ancient. And I saw a true god of the brilliant heaven godfolk being cut down in the Outer Sea. Later, during the tens of thousands of years that passed after I was injured, I told a story about that true god to time itself. Ultimately, about 1,000 years ago, time recognized my story, and I could sense an aura that indicated that true god had returned. The god is weak and is still in the process of awakening, but it's enough for me to finish telling the story. The reason I chose the two of you as bait is that both of you are connected to the Summer Immortals. You're linked by karma. This true god was originally killed by a Summer Immortal, and though the two of you aren't related to that specific Summer Immortal's essence, in this starry sky of the gods, there are only a few Summer Immortals. That's why you two are the best choice to be bait. I want to make use of your auras to lure out that extremely weak true god. I want my story to become true and real, and in that way push my god altar to the very peak. And then I can find that most extremely elusive path to true god. Yu Luqian wasn't hiding anything. By the time he finished explaining his mission, Su Qing and Erniu were shaken to the core. And that was when the red cloud stopped moving. They had arrived at the Outer Sea. On the surface of the water there was an endless line. On one side everything was black. That was the Inner Sea. On the other side everything was violet. That was the Outer Sea. Chapter 999. the gruish outer sea. The canopy of heaven was not pitch black. The blood cloud became a source of light, casting a crimson glow out in all directions. Su Qing and Erniu were inside the cloud listening to Yu Luchun and looking out at the surface of the sea. The dividing line between the black and violet parts of the sea formed an infinite scar on the surface of the water. It was a very clear border marking the boundary between the inner and outer parts of the Forbidden Sea. The inner sea was definitely a dangerous place, but comparatively speaking, that danger could be kept in control. Whether it was Emperor Receiving Prefecture, the continent of South Phoenix, or even the South Isle region and the countless islands of the sea, such areas had been explored for tens of thousands of years. Granted, there were different areas suitable for different levels of cultivation base, but the generations of exploration ensured that the inner sea wasn't a complete mystery. But the outer sea was considered taboo to the living beings of revered ancient, even back when it was patrolled by a sun and moon. People who qualified to go there were as rare as phoenix feathers or Qilin horns. Without the proper cultivation base, people who forced their way into the outer sea wouldn't last very long before they were killed in body and soul. In fact, there were many times when someone died without even knowing how they had perished. It almost wasn't necessary to mention how things changed tens of thousands of years later, when Golden Crow and Night Watch perished, depriving the outer sea of a sun and moon. After that, the place was cloaked in endless darkness and gloom, and it became even more difficult to find people who were qualified to explore the place. From then on, the primary features of the outer sea became mystery and the unknown. Although Yu Liuchun's description had pulled back some of the veil that covered the outer sea, the truth was that what lay beneath that veil was still boundlessly enigmatical, endlessly abstruse. Erniu was actually struck speechless, and wasn't even sure what to make of the new information. As he looked at the outer sea, his eyes contained mixed emotions. Su Qing likewise struggled to balance the myriad thoughts and emotions running through him. Given what he had seen when riding the dragon chariot and receiving that legacy, he could tell that what Yu Luchun had just told them was almost certainly true. The outer sea has a history that goes back farther than the brilliant heaven godfolk. And the brilliant heaven godfolk actually came from the outer sea. If that's the case, then where did this so-called outer sea actually come from? Su Qing already had a speculation. He looked up at the dome of heaven to the broken face of the god suspended above revered ancient. So, why did he come to revered ancient? For tens of thousands of years, countless people had wondered about that, but there had never been an answer. Theories were proliferating within Su Qing's heart and mind. Meanwhile, Yu Luchun took a deep breath and softly asked, "Can you smell that?" Su Qing nodded. It was the aroma of blood, and it came from the outer sea. In fact, to be most precise, it was the aura of the outer sea. It was similar to that of the inner sea, but was completely different on a substructural level. Before the Father God came, Yu Luchun went on, the outer sea was this exact same color. Black is the color of the godly aura of the brilliant heaven godfolk. But mix that with the blood of other unknown entities, and you get a sea the color violet. Later, the Father God's aura invaded the outer sea, and thus, the godly aura that you cultivators call mutagen became stronger and more complex. That was how this delicious aroma developed. It makes me think of a legend that circulates in all of the star rings. Eyes gleaming, Yu Luchun yet again took a deep breath, savoring the bloody aroma of the outer sea. Meanwhile, Su Qing and Erniu exchanged a glance. Senior, Su Qing said quietly, "What legend are you talking about?" Yu Luchun gave Su Qing a very meaningful look, then looked up at the magnificent broken face hanging high in the dome of heaven. "It's a legend about the Father God," he said simply. He clearly wasn't willing to go into any further detail about the legend. Waving his right hand, he sent the red cloud flying toward the boundary between the inner and outer seas. An instant later, the red cloud crossed from the black to the violet. Su Qing and Erniu were officially in the outer sea. At that point, the red cloud stopped moving and started fading from existence. Yet again, Yu Liuchun's voice echoed out. "I want the two of you to travel onward alone. Go deep into the outer sea. As far as you can go. You don't need to do anything other than that. Your mere presence is enough to make you the perfect bait." Along with the words came a force of expulsion that sent Su Qing and Erniu flying out of the cloud and toward the violet surface of the sea. Su Qing immediately produced his dreadnought, which looked like the old woman Join. In the inner sea, A dreadnought landing on the surface of the water would create massive waves. 1. But this was the outer sea. Despite only being on the edge of it, the water was extremely dense, and any waves that resulted were hardly visible. The surface of the sea looked like dead water that wasn't moving at all. The dreadnought was likewise not moving. As Su Qing and Ernyu stood atop it, they could sense the profundity of the outer sea, and as such they kept fully on guard. There was a mysterious and unnameable pressure in the outer sea, as well as a terrifying aura. Combined with other unknown substances, it created an intangible mental tempest that battered against them constantly. Su Qing shivered. Ernyu was breathing heavily. Already they could sense their souls trembling. At the same time, an intense trepidation arose within their hearts, something they couldn't control as it spread to fill them. It was a sensation similar to that experienced by Su Qing years ago, when he went out to sea for the first time after joining Seven Blood Eyes. Back then, the inner sea had seemed like a place of infinite mystery and danger. He got the same feeling again right now. 2. It took a short time for them to acclimate. Then they exchanged another glance. Ernyu sighed. I was assuming we would go to a specific destination and then get used as bait. I never imagined that we would be asked to wander freely. Ernyu was slightly irritated, and was increasingly coming to the conclusion that Yu Luqian was a very lazy god. It would have been one thing for Yu Luqian to use the two of them on a fishing expedition, but as it turned out, the bait was supposed to go running around? So very obviously unprofessional. Ernyu squatted down and looked more closely at the violet water. Meanwhile, Su Qing thought about the situation for the moment, and then decided to provide a quick reminder. Eldest brother, back on Golden Crow's dragon chariot, I saw a good deal of the outer sea. There are a lot of very terrifying things out here. If I were you, I'd avoid doing anything suicidal. Ernyu was not very pleased to hear Su Qing talking like that. Little Ah Qing, how could you talk about me, your eldest brother, in such a manner? That was extremely hurtful. I'm the kind of person who never ever does suicidal things. If I were that kind of person, how could I still be alive right now? Su Qing did nothing except look calmly at Ernyu. His gaze caused a bit of guilt to spark within Ernyu. He cleared his throat. All right, fine. Fine. I won't do anything suicidal. Su Qing nodded, then performed a right-handed incantation gesture. Instantly, the dreadnought's defensive shields activated, surrounding them on all sides. And then Su Qing poured power into the unique dreadnought to send it rumbling into motion. 3 days passed. During that time, there was no change between day and night. Everything was pitch black. The silence only grew deeper. They hardly ever heard the sound of waves. In fact, based on sound alone, it almost didn't seem like they were out at sea. However, the humidity from the water, and the increasingly strong smell of blood, were a constant reminder to Su Qing that they were definitely in the outer sea. Whether the dreadnought was in the inner sea or the revered ancient mainland, it had astounding defenses and could be considered physically enormous. But after only 3 days in the outer sea, it was covered by a violet fog, and that fog was already starting to decay the defensive shields. After sensing what was happening, Su Qing and Ernyu both looked very serious. It was the type of decay that normally occurred with the passage of great amounts of time. This outer sea really is an unusual place, Ernyu said, reaching out to touch the layer of fog outside the dreadnought. It's not just pitch black and completely silent. The complex mutagen has extremely gruish effects on foreign objects. The dreadnought has only been under the effects for 3 days, but it seems more like it's been 1,000 years. Su Qing was about to reply when he suddenly looked off into the distance. Ernyu detected the same thing and looked in the same direction. Given the level of their cultivation bases, they were able to see some things in the darkness of the outer sea, although their vision was definitely limited. And thus, they could see the vague outline of some objects floating up ahead. They were jagged rocks of varying sizes and shapes, floating on the surface of the water. It was as if they weren't capable of sinking down. All of them emanated ancient auras that seemed to bear witness to the passage of unfathomable amounts of time. Su Qing had seen similar scenes when riding the dragon chariot. There were many areas full of ruins in the outer sea. Back then, he hadn't paid very close attention to them, but right now, his eyes glittered darkly. Something's off here, eldest brother. Su Qing walked to the edge of the dreadnought and sent his god source into his eyes as he looked at the floating rocks. Beyond the rocks were some sprawling ruins atop the water. It was as if a city had once stood here, only for it to crumble, leaving behind shattered walls and devastated buildings. In the middle of the ruins was a damaged temple. There was a figure visible in the temple. It was a little girl dressed in an ancient style of clothing. She sat on a broken section of wall, her feet bare and her legs swinging back and forth in a very relaxed manner. She appeared to be singing a song, except that no words came out of her mouth. However, she was surrounded by a host of shocking ghosts that were bowing to her in worship. 3. The moment Su Qing spotted the girl, his heart seized, and a spine-tingling sensation exploded within him. It was an instinctive reaction from his soul telling him that he was in extreme danger. Erniu was using his own methods to observe the scene, and his pupils constricted. Shivering, he projected a message to Su Qing via divine will. What the hell is that thing? It doesn't look like a ghost but also doesn't look like a god. It's definitely not a cultivator. It doesn't even have an aura of death. Wait, hold on. It doesn't have any aura at all. Don't tell me this is the god Yu Luqian is fishing for. But if that's the case, why do I get the sense that this thing is even more terrifying than Yu Luqian himself? Ernia's intuition was usually spot on, and right now it was telling him that this entity was vastly more dangerous than Yu Luqian. Little Ah Qing. What are the chances Yu Luqian will hook a shark on this fishing expedition and end up getting himself killed? Looking very serious, Su Qing set the dreadnought on a different course in order to go around the area. However, that was when the girl on the wall in the temple suddenly turned to look at them. Her eyes were pure black, but there was a smile on her face. Su Qing's mind reeled as the god source in his eyes collapsed. His line of sight collapsed, and all he could see was darkness. At the same time, he felt as if there was something extremely cold behind him, right on his back. A tender voice spoke directly into his mind, clear and crisp. Don't go any further than this, sweetie. Beyond this point, you'll only find the end of the sea, and the end of life itself. Chapter 1000. Nervous. Exhausted. Drained. The indistinct voice carried a frigid coldness that, upon entering the mind, became as icy as a glacier. In fact, it almost seemed like it could make chunks of ice form in the soul. Waves of frigid will spread through Su Qing's soul, quickly affecting his senses, until he felt like all bits of warmth had left him. Cold permeated him. Every single word spoken to him was like a curse, sending the frigid energy into his sea of consciousness, causing his god source to become as inert as if it was dead. And that made the frigid will seem like something eternal. The sensation caused Su Qing's consciousness to stagnate. However, in the very last moment before his mind went completely blank, he sent some god perception to the golden crow within him. All of a sudden, the cry of the golden crow echoed in Su Qing's mind. The sound was like a summoning, drawing the sun out from within Su Qing's body. As a result, Su Qing's body was like a world, and within that world, the sun rose, shining onto his soul. Black fire surged, spreading through every part of him. 10 beams of profound sun immortal light appeared, unleashing boundless light and heat. As of this moment, there was sunrise in his sea of consciousness, casting a boundless glow. The moment it made contact with the frigid coldness, a faint sigh drifted into Su Qing's mind. Don't forget about what I warned you, sweetie. Also, your friend is wrong. I'm not a freakish monster. If he badmouths me again, I'll take him away with me. It was hard to tell if it was because of the sun within Su Qing, or because the little girl had changed her mind, but either way, after the mysterious voice spoke, the coldness on Su Qing's back vanished. He heard laughter disappearing off into the distance. All of a sudden, the darkness in front of him and the coldness inside burst into flames. The coldness was burned away, and his sensations returned. The moment he could see, he inhaled sharply and looked over his shoulder. There wasn't anything behind him other than Erniu, who looked like he had been frozen into ice. That said, there was a warm flow pulsing off him, as well as the fragrant aroma of tea. As a result, the frigid coldness was already melting. The tea was the very same tea that Yu Luqian had offered as a gift. Upon confirming that his eldest brother was unharmed, Su Qing forced himself to calm down. Taking control of the dreadnought, he sent it speeding around the ruins, which took roughly an incense stick's worth of time. After getting a good distance away, Su Qing turned to look back into the darkness, his face pale. He could still just barely make out the crumbling buildings. He was now more on guard against the outer sea than ever. Was that a god? Su Qing's heart thumped with lingering fear. He had encountered many gods, and though that little girl had seemed like she was connected to gods in some way, she herself didn't seem like a god. At the very last moment, my immortal light seemed effective, except that girl also seemed to leave of her own volition. Did the light really do anything? As for my friend who called her a freakish monster, Su Qing looked silently at Ernyu as an ice statue. Waving his hand, he sent some immortal light over to the statue. The ice gradually melted. After enough time passed for an incense stick to burn, it was gone, and Ernyu's eyes opened wide. The first thing he did was open his mouth wide and deeply inhale the lingering frigid energy. He shivered and frost formed on his eyebrows. Normally speaking, he was the person who used ice as an asset. But even despite the danger, he couldn't suppress his greed. Even though the frigid energy made it seem like he might end up frozen again, he still consumed it. A moment later, his face fell and he vomited. Out came a massive rotting clump of head hair. As the head hair fell, it turned into frigid energy that scattered in all directions. It took a while to vomit up all the hair, after which Ernyu shivered in fear. He dropped into a sitting position and looked back at the ruins. I miscalculated. That wasn't frigid energy. That was a combination of death energy and corpse energy. Completely and utterly revolting. Eating it didn't help me one bit. And that thing, that freakish mon. It told me to tell you that if you badmouthed it, Su Qing quickly interrupted, it would take you away with it. Ernyu's mouth clamped shut. He was actually shocked. Thinking back to the moment that little girl had turned around, he realized that his inner monologue had indeed involved calling her a freakish monster. Could it be that she came over because of something I merely thought? How petty. In the end, Ernyu couldn't be sure. There was someone else who was even less sure of what had just played out, and that was Yu Luchen. He was hiding in the void and looking at those ruins with a very serious expression. What He could see was very different from what Su Qing and Ernyu had seen. What they saw as ruins did not appear to be ruins to him. He saw endless hair, wrapped up endlessly into a huge hairball. It was rotting, withered, and putrid as it spread out in all directions. The little girl was actually made from a huge conglomeration of hair, and emanated a boundless sense of vile evil as she stared at Yu Luchen. Was it Su Qing's special qualities that attracted that thing, or was it the ox's unusual attributes? After a moment of hesitation, Yu Luchen chose the path of peace and harmony. Extracting a thread of God source from himself, He turned it into a cup of tea that He sent floating over to the little girl. Please drink. The little girl smiled and sent out a mass of hairs that wrapped around the teacup. The teacup was pulled back into the hairball ruins where it vanished. Time passed. Ernyu vomited a few more times, yet was clearly still having stomach issues. About half a month passed, during which his entire body turned black, and he began to grow rotting hair all over. Eventually, he had so much hair that if he shed his clothing, he looked like was covered in fur. Not even shaving could get rid of it. Of course, there was little need to mention that Ernyu's personality was unusual. Although he was a bit upset at first, after a few days, he got used to the hair, and even started to seem pleased with it. Little Qing, based on what I can tell, this hair has some amazing defensive properties. Now that my body is covered, it's basically like having a suit of hair armor. Plus it's very warm and comfortable. This is great. Truly great. I think I'll grow it out a bit longer, then figure out a way to cut it off and weave it into a garment. I bet I could sell it for a very hefty price. Eyes gleaming, Ernyu stroked the hair. What's more, I've come to realize that after growing this hair out, things have been much safer than before. Think about it, during this entire time we haven't run into anything dangerous. Sadly, the pressure here is too intense to be able to fly very far. Otherwise, we could probably make much better progress. Su Qing wasn't inclined to pay much attention to Ernyu's ramblings. Sitting down, he closed his eyes to meditate while Ernyu took a breath to continue blustering. But then Su Qing's eyes snapped open, and Ernyu stopped talking. Both of them looked off into the distance. Far ahead of the dreadnought, in what had previously been a mass of complete darkness, something unexpected had appeared. A sun was rising up from the surface of the water. It was huge and majestic, and the moment it appeared, it cast brilliant light into the sky. The sea water rippled, reflecting the sun and its light, casting it out in all directions. It was the blood-red color of sunset. Su Qing shivered inwardly. Ernie's eyes went wide. And yet, it didn't take long for them to realize that this thing wasn't actually a sun. That was because, all of a sudden, a second sun rose from the surface of the water in a different direction. And things weren't over after that. Further off, a third one appeared. Then came a fourth, a fifth, and a sixth. Heaven and earth grew brighter and brighter as, in the space of an incense stick's worth of time, more than 30 suns rose up into the air. All were bright, though some were more intense while others were somewhat weak. The light they cast couldn't travel very far, and definitely couldn't cover the entire outer sea. Could only shine on certain areas. Strangely, they didn't emanate any heat whatsoever. And even more gruish was the fact that these rising suns would quickly drop back down. They did so at different rates, occasionally shooting up into the sky, and occasionally dropping down into the sea. As a result, the outer sea areas that were affected experienced intersecting periods of light and dark. Mutagen grew stronger. The godly aura grew more viscous. Moments later, even as Su Qing and Ernie felt their hearts pounding, a slit appeared on one of the more than 30 suns, the one closest to them. The slit ran right down the middle of the sun. The slit opened. It looked like an eye. In fact, precisely speaking, it was an eye. It was as if it had been woken from sleep, and was now staring at the dreadnought occupied by Su Qing and Ernie. The moment the gaze landed on the dreadnought, it started crumbling away. Ripples and distortions spread in the air, and Su Qing and Ernie were affected. Their bodies almost immediately showed signs of mutation. Shockingly, Ernie shivered, and when he spoke next, his voice was shrill. "Ah Qing, hurry up and start dancing with me. This is the dream of some unknown god. And it's a terrifying god, with dreams that are half real." Ernie jumped up and started dancing, causing the fur covering him to sway back and forth. This, of course, was a dance especially designed to be performed for gods. He even started chanting some sort of lyrics which were some sort of sacrifice. Su Qing didn't dare to react too slowly, so he jumped up and started dancing with Ernie. In a past life in the Moonright region, Ernie had been the grand dancer, and thus had learned a lot about the dreams of gods. And thus, as he danced, the sun-like eye stopped in midair and watched the show. 1. Time ticked by. 6 hours later, the huge eye slowly closed. Then, along with the other sun eyes, it dropped back down into the sea and disappeared. Without any hesitation, Su Qing sent the battered dreadnought flying off into the darkness. After some time passed in which they confirmed nothing unusual was going on, Su Qing and Ernie breathed sighs of relief. Looking at each other, they chuckled bitterly. "Little Ah Qing, do you think that Luchan fellow is still around? I feel like this place is just too dangerous. Luchan probably already caught the fish he was after. What do you say we head back?" Su Qing mulled it over, looked around, and then nodded. "We can go back the way we came. If Senior Luchan has an issue with that, he can just come out and tell us." "Exactly. And if he doesn't show up, then it will prove that he's okay with us leaving." After exchanging another glance, they unhesitatingly sent the dreadnought shooting back toward the inner sea. The very same Luchan they were wondering about was currently down on the seafloor. Down there, the more than 30 suns that had sunk down under the surface of the water had reverted to their original appearance, and were now clustered together in a group. They looked like more than 30 enormous eyeballs, connected with draping strings of slime. To some extent, they somewhat resembled grapes. And they were staring at Luchan. Luchan wasn't making any moves, but inside he was cursing. This was not his first time in the outer sea. In fact, he had explored it on many occasions. The outer sea was a mysterious place, and had many locations that even he would consider dangerous. But the reality was that it was massive to the point of being boundless, and thus, as long as he didn't explore too deeply, it was unlikely that he would encounter anything that would prompt him to extend an offer to drink tea. But things had changed this time around. It might have been possible to chalk up that little girl to coincidence. But what he was looking at now was something that, normally speaking, lived in the depths of the outer sea. It was quite unexpected to encounter something like this here. After all, this location was far, far away from the true depths. In fact, it could be considered coastal waters. Granted, I brought them here to be bait. But why are they attracting so many random things? Yu Luqian sighed inwardly. Realizing there was nothing he could do about it, he waved his hand to send a cup of tea over. Please drink. The grape-like eyes all narrowed their eyelids, then sent out a branch-like tentacle that wrapped around the teacup and slowly dragged it down to the seafloor. Then the grape-like eyes vanished. Yu Luqian was mentally exhausted. Sensing that Su Qing and Ernyu were leaving, he hesitated briefly, then decided not to stop them. Coastal waters are coastal waters after all. Hopefully things will be safer going forward. Besides, I can already sense that the true god I want to hook is on the move. And this god is definitely very weak. Expectation started to build within Yu Luqian. However, there was quite a big difference between expectation and reality. The story told by this god, whose godly authority related to stories, was apparently being influenced in the outer sea. That became very apparent a few days later on the very still and peaceful outer sea. Qing Ernyu said, I was thinking about the past few days, and I realized that the situation with that little girl happened after I badmouthed her in my inner dialogue. And then the situation with the sons happened after I mentioned us being safe. He looked seriously at Su Qing. Something strange is going on. It's almost as if my words have some unusual power here in the outer sea. Could it be that the ancient legend is true? Su Qing looked back at Ernyu, and his expression turned very serious. The truth was that he had been thinking something very similar, although his conclusion wasn't that everything had to do with his eldest brother, but rather his own connection to Golden Crow. Ever since coming to the outer sea, he had felt as if there was an ancient gaze secretly focused on him. After what Ernyu just said, Su Qing couldn't help but ask, what legend? Ernyu took a deep breath. The legend tells the story of the outer sea lord of yesteryear. He was incomparably handsome, matchless in the world, graceful with innumerable concubines. He was primeval, ancient, and gloriously holy. But one day, he grew tired of being so unequaled, and thus he left the sea. On the eve of departure, he said, when I return, all gods will come and bow to me. Ernyu cleared his throat. At first, Su Qing had been paying very close attention, but he quickly came to realize that something about the story sounded off. Eldest brother, where did that legend originate? Me, of course. Ernyu chuckled and his fur jiggled. I'm just joking around. Ha ha ha. I could tell that you were feeling more and more nervous the past few days, and I just wanted to calm you down. Based on my calculations, we passed through his area earlier, and it's a very safe. Before Ernyu could finish speaking, something extremely dramatic happened. Intense rumbling sounds filled the area they were in, completely shattering the calm of the outer sea. Huge waves even broke out on the surface of the water. It was like a tsunami. This was unlike anything that had happened before. Su Qing shivered. Ernyu's eyes went wide and he gasped. Neither of them hesitated at all to immediately power up the dreadnought and send it flying up into the air and away from the surface. Unfortunately, the water was actually rising up into the air as well. If one could look down on the scene from high above, it would be obvious that the rising portion of the sea was circular in shape. And it was so massive that, compared to it, the dreadnought was like a tiny dot. As that circular section of sea rose higher and higher, it became clear that it was actually a bowl. Astonishingly, this area of the sea was actually inside a gigantic bowl. Next to become visible was a many-armed sea demon larger than an entire prefecture, rising up from the water. The only words that could describe it were hair-raising, destabilizing, and extremely disturbing. It was just too big. It held something in each of its hands, and in one of those hands was the sea bowl Su Qing and Ernyu were in, and it was on the move. Su Qing and Ernyu were reeling, and didn't dare to move a muscle. Clearly, they were as insignificant as dust to this terrifying sea demon. A few hours passed, whereupon the gargantuan sea demon sank back down into the water, disappearing as if it had never been there. The bowl also sank away. Su Qing and Ernyu stood on the dreadnought, their faces pale. Some distance away in the void, Yu Luqian's face was also pale. There's something seriously wrong with these two. Otherwise, why would they be attracting the notice of so many ancient entities? I brought them to be bait, but I didn't mean for them to hook things like this. Yu Luqian was starting to get the sense that if these two were allowed to roam free, they would very likely attract even more terrifying entities. And if that happened before the fish He wanted to hook arrived, then it was very possible that both the fisherman and the bait would perish. With such thoughts in mind, Yu Luqian unhesitatingly vanished, then reappeared on the dreadnought with Su Qing and Ernyu. Upon seeing Yu Luqian, Su Qing and Ernyu guiltily clasped hands and bowed. "There's no need for bowing and scraping," Yu Luqian said. "I'm taking you out of here." "Huh," Ernyu blurted. "You're not going to just let us go on our own? If you go on your own, I'm afraid I'm going to run into something that'll end up devouring me in a single bite." Not wanting to waste any time, Yu Luqian waved his hand to grab up Su Qing and Ernyu, then stepped up into the dome of heaven. "Stop joking around, Senior," Ernyu said. "With you around, it wouldn't be possible to run into something that'll devour." Right then, Su Qing inhaled sharply, and his scalp tingled as he thought back to what his eldest brother had mentioned earlier. He was just going to speak up to warn Yu Luqian when Yu Luqian suddenly looked to the side. His face fell. Su Qing and Ernyu could sense that something was off, so they turned to look in the same direction. "Why's the sky turning red?" Ernyu murmured, his eyes widening with panic. "Do my words really have this much of an effect on the outer sea?" As for Su Qing, he was dumbstruck, but at the same time sensed something else. He felt more clearly than ever that there was an ancient gaze focused on him. All of a sudden the sky fell. It was as if some heaven-shaking, earth-shattering entity had opened its mouth. Either that or this entity's mouth had always been opened, and now it was taking a bite. Chapter 1001. A mysterious individual in Timeruan's body. There was a fish in the outer sea that was named Timeruans. It lived in the void and was very rarely seen. Whenever it came out, its upper jaw became a scarlet heaven, and its lower jaw became a boundless sea. It would devour the light of the sun and moon, and would gobble up any and all living beings. In fact, it could even swallow time and space. There were very few beings who knew what it looked like. They only knew that when Timeruans came out, heaven and earth became empty. For example, this moment. When the red sky appeared, nothing existed. Even the sea sank down, as if it were suddenly missing some of itself. A vortex appeared on the surface of the water, rumbling with deafening loudness. The sound echoed across the outer sea, causing infinite vibrations, and kicking up a tempest that would last for months on end. Su Qing and Ernyu had vanished. Eventually, the wind kicked the sea up into a frenzy, and lightning crashed in the sky. Rain began to fall in the outer sea. Within that rain, Yu Luqian hovered in midair looking stunned. The danger earlier had been so immense that all He could do was flee for his life. He had been unable to do anything to save Su Qing and Ernyu. When Timeruans devoured something, it wasn't just a devouring of physical things. Something devoured by Timeruans was scraped out of fate, time, and all possible dimensions. That was why He had been unable to do anything but watch as Su Qing and Ernyu disappeared right in front of him. Even Timeruans showed up? This can't be a coincidence. Yu Luqian wanted to curse someone, except then his eyes narrowed, and a blood-red glow sprang up around him. Hold on a second. Ever since I arrived in the outer sea, my emotions have been all off. Yu Luqian knew that his stories required emotions. That was the only way to make the stories moving, and the only way to affect people. That was why He sometimes didn't seem like other gods, who were cold and apathetic. That was a conscious decision based on his godly authority. However, on a substructural level, gods were cold and apathetic. That was something nobody could change. Therefore, though it seemed like He had plenty of emotion in him, it was really just an act. But on this trip out to sea, things were different. I'm being influenced. Some unknown entity is stirring emotions up within me? Shaken, Yu Luqian looked out at the sea. A moment passed, and then He suddenly started speaking. As He did, godly authority spread out, entering the dome of heaven, marking the sea, and turning into the true words of a Dra incantation, the foundation of which was a true name. One day, a god named Yu Luqian took Su Qing and Chen Ernyu out to sea. To Yu Luqian, the outer sea was not an unfamiliar place. But to Su Qing and Chen Ernyu, it was a place full of unknowns. Under the influence of some unknowable and unspeakable force, they encountered an inauspicious sculpture, and then ran into a dreaming sun. After, they crossed paths with a patrolling sea demon. Finally, they came across Timeruans. Timeruans wasn't hungry. and just carried out an ordinary devouring of heaven. And then 10 hours later, the next instant, wild colors flashed and intense rumbling sounds echoed out as his true words showed signs of shattering. That indicated that it wasn't possible for his story to become true. Seeing that, Yu quickly made a correction. And then a day later, the true words rumbled, forming into a sealing mark. However, as soon as the sealing mark appeared, it started cracking and crumbling. Yu again made a correction. And then 7 days later, though the crumbling slowed, it was clear that it was still going on. And then a month later, Yu corrected, and his godly authority trembled. This time, though the sealing mark vibrated loudly, it didn't crumble. Given that, Yu felt comfortable continuing his story. And then a month later, in the east of the outer sea, some 80 million kilometers out, water gushed out from the sky. The moment the words were spoken, heavenly thunder rumbled and the sea surged. Sealing marks glittered brightly, forming truth and reality. Yu sent out some god perception, exhaled a breath of energy, then stepped up into the dome of heaven and vanished. The rain fell harder. What the hell kind of place is this? This rain is corrosive. In the world inside of time ruins, Su-Ching and Ernyu scowled as they raced through midair. It was raining here too. And this rain was corrosive. They had been trapped for 10 days. 10 days earlier, heaven fell and devoured the sea, and everything went black. When the world became clear again, they were in this place. There seemed to be stars in the sky glittering brightly. However, if you looked closely, you would realize that they weren't actually stars. Instead, they were luminescent flowers. The lands below were a swampy marsh filled with endless ruins and sludge. During the 10 days that passed, Su-Ching and Ernyu had long since come to the conclusion that they were inside of whatever gargantuan entity had devoured them. They had also come to realize how huge that entity's body was. They had flown for 10 days straight and not reached any end point. After doing some exploring, Su-Ching could only guess that they hadn't even seen 1/10,000th of the world inside this creature. That conclusion made their hearts sink. Thankfully, they hadn't run into any dangers inside this terrifying being's body. There was the endless rain but nothing else. No living beings. But there was no end to what lay in front of them, and the dim starlight was getting increasingly annoying. What made them particularly jittery were the statues they had seen in the ruins. Some were crumbling but others were intact. They came in all shapes and forms, but the combination of the strange statues and the dim starlight made this world seem evil and demonic. Though the statues never came to life, the auras they exuded were difficult for Su-Ching and Ernyu to suppress. "Ching, we can't go on like this," Ernyu murmured at a certain point. Su-Ching didn't reply at first. Looking off into the distance, he felt more strongly than ever that he was being watched. And he was also experiencing a premonition that the Watcher was up ahead. "Is it possible," he murmured, "that everything which happened to us before was arranged on purpose?" When Ernyu realized Su-Ching wasn't paying attention to him, he sighed. "It doesn't matter. I have no choice now but to use a trump card. After all, flying along like we have isn't going to get us out of here." Su-Ching looked over at Ernyu. He knew what Ernyu was planning to do. Ernyu took a deep breath, looked around, then loudly said, "How come we can't even hear anything breathing in here? I guess that means this place is very safe." Ernyu vigilantly looked around only to realize that nothing unexpected was happening. After waiting for a long moment, he blinked suspiciously a few times. That was when Su-Ching suddenly said, "Eldest brother, I get the feeling that there's something up ahead watching us." Hearing that, Ernyu looked around again. A moment passed and he looked back at Su-Ching. Both could see each other's eyes shining with determination. Since they had no way out, then even if there was someone up ahead, then they both knew they might as well go check out the situation. They immediately started moving at top speed. A few days later, both of them spotted something like the glow of a fire up ahead, which stood out prominently within the dim starlight. Su-Ching stopped in place, his vigilance spiking. What he was seeing caused his heart, and Ernia's heart, to start pounding. The glow was coming from a bonfire. Next to the bonfire was an old man who appeared to be human. He was nothing special to look at. He had a hemp sandal on one foot, while the other foot was bare. He was holding some iron skewers out over the fire, upon which were chunks of unknown meat, sizzling in the heat. Upon noticing them, the old man looked up, and his hooded eyes flitted up and down as he assessed Su Qing. So I was right. You're like a god but not, and like a cultivator but not. Even more interesting is that you have human destiny aura on you. You used to be human, though you don't have a human fleshly body anymore. It might be a bit of a stretch, but I'd say you still count as human. Then he looked at Ernie. But what the hell are you exactly? A fur monster. Chapter 1002. This world of yours. The sky was dark and oppressive. The surrounding lands were made of endless swamp. Ruins could be seen everywhere, adding to the sinister atmosphere. And contrary to expectation, the dusky world inside of Time Ruins also had a bonfire, seated next to which was an old man. It was an extremely gruish scene. Was this individual a human or a ghast? Was he a gru or a god? Su Qing couldn't tell. However, his heart was absolutely full of vigilance and anxiety, and that was because from the moment he had entered the outer sea, he had sensed a hidden gaze, and it came from here. Put more precisely, it was this old man's gaze. That realization formed the basis of his anxiety. It was impossible to tell where this person came from, or whether he had good intentions or malicious ones. Su Qing could easily imagine how this old man had been watching him during his entire time in the outer sea. And for them to meet now seemed to indicate that the old man had power that exceeded that of an altar god. Could he be trapped in here? The moment that thought occurred to Su Qing, he excised it from his mind. Having dealt with so many gods, he knew full well that some terrifying entities could use god perception to read thoughts at a glance. Clearing his mind, he looked at the old man, clasped hands and bowed at the waist. Greetings, senior. Erniu's face was pale, and his pupils were constricted. He was also trembling from the shock he felt. This person's mere gaze made Erniu feel like his soul had been seen through, as if there was no secret he could keep hidden. Erniu scoured his memories, but couldn't remember ever having met any powerful expert who resembled this old man. Even taking into consideration his past life memories, this man definitely seemed like a stranger. That said, Erniu's special abilities ensured that he was actually able to get a slightly more precise read on the old man's cultivation base. What level are we dealing with here? Summer Immortal? True God? Or something higher than Summer Immortal? Something higher than True God? Such thoughts caused Erniu to start breathing heavily. His scalp felt like it was going numb. Without a moment of hesitation, he plastered a reverent expression onto his face. Looking at the old man and his roasting meat, he bowed formally. Well met, senior, he said in a very earnest tone. I am your humble servant Chen Erniu. Senior, many thanks to you for your kindness. I would sacrifice my life if necessary to pay you back for your magnanimity. In fact, going forward, I'm going to change my name to Fur Monster. Erniu's words struck Su Qing like lightning. He knew his eldest brother very well, and it was an extremely rare thing for him to immediately act in such a respectful way. For example, even when dealing with Yu Luchan, his eldest brother had done nothing more than just offer some flattering words. But just now he had outright thanked this person for a kindness. Su Qing could tell that this old man had to be terrifying, otherwise, his eldest brother wouldn't act in such a way. The old man next to the bonfire smiled enigmatically and looked Su Qing and Erniu up and down yet again. For monster, you have the aura of a curse on you. Very interesting. Why does it seem like you actually placed the curse on yourself? I can tell you have a lot of past human lives, so for the time being, I'm going to count you as human. Erniu smiled awkwardly. As the old man spoke, he flipped over the iron skewers with the meat on them. A disgusting odor filled the area, so putrid it made one inclined to vomit. And yet, after smelling it, it would get the saliva flowing as if it were a delicacy. Care to eat, you too? The old man asked. Su Qing hesitated. Erniu instantly shook his head. Ever since consuming that frigid energy and growing all the fur, he really had been suffering from an upset stomach. More importantly, though, he didn't dare to eat this meat. Although it was true that he used to believe his stomach could handle any sort of food, this old man's gaze gave him the feeling that holding back from eating was probably the best thing. We don't need to eat, Erniu said. We were full before we got here. The old man's facial expression suddenly turned grim. The oppressive sensation in the area grew stronger. The canopy of heaven trembled, almost as if it might shatter, all while the land shook and water vapor rose up into the air. It looked like the swampy lands were drying up. Upon seeing that, both Suqing and Erniu felt jumpy with fear. Looking very serious, Erniu looked over at Suqing. "Little junior brother, hurry up and eat with the old grandpa. You know the saying, respect the old and cherish the young. That's a virtue among us humans. The old grandpa is obviously old, and you're obviously young." Suqing glanced at Erniu, and he felt his heart sinking. He knew what Erniu meant. If they kept refusing this gruish old man, he would eventually get angry. And Suqing did have a very special fleshly body. With such thoughts on his mind, Suqing's eyes filled with determination. Walking over, he sat down cross-legged next to the bonfire. The man handed a skewer of meat to him. Suqing accepted it somberly. He looked at the meat, suppressed the urge to vomit, gritted his teeth and took a bite. Next, his expression became one of great curiosity. Looking at the meat more closely, he took another bite. After swallowing, he realized it tasted delicious. And there was also a miraculous heat flowing through him. It only took him 4 or 5 bites to finish all of the meat on the skewer. Some distance away, Erniu watched curiously as all of this happened. Just when he was about to ask Suqing what was going on, the old man smiled mysteriously. "Tastes good?" he asked Suqing. Suqing nodded. He had no idea where this meat came from, but it was definitely the most delicious thing he had eaten in his entire life. The old man grinned. Reaching out to his right side, he grasped at the air. A rumbling sound echoed out, and a wall of meat flew toward him from off in the distance, moving with mountain-toppling, sea-draining force. The wall was as high as the sky, and seemed to go on forever, making it seem like it was the wall of the entire world. And as it neared, the world seemed to get smaller. Soon the enormous wall of meat stopped right next to the old man. The old man then used his hand to scrape a strip of meat off the wall, and thread it onto the skewer. This development caused Suqing to inhale deeply. As for Erniu, his eyes bulged on the verge of popping out of his skull as he stared at the wall. This was no wall. It was obviously the flesh of whatever terrifying living being they were all inside of. Erniu licked his lips. "Grandpa, actually I'm not completely full yet." "I'm not full yet either," the old man said coolly. He handed another skewer to Suqing. Erniu looked slightly crestfallen and hurt, but he didn't dare to say anything further, and could only watch Suqing impatiently. Suqing accepted the skewer, and without so much as a glance in Erniu's direction, he started eating. The warmth within him grew more intense, and with every bite that he took, his aura erupted explosively. By now it was obvious to him that these meat skewers definitely counted as a destined opportunity and good fortune. His soul was being nourished, and the connection between it and his flesh and blood was growing stronger. Holding absolutely nothing back, he took one bite after another. Erniu was starting to get anxious, and his mouth was watering. However, he didn't dare to take a step closer. Inside he was saying, "It's just some meat, right? Nothing special." And thus, Erniu waited impatiently while Suqing and the old man ate several skewers. Eventually, Suqing reached the point where he couldn't eat anymore. He wanted to, and his fleshly body could accept it, but his soul had reached the point of being full. Seeing that, the old man smiled. "You're that much of a foodie? In that case, there's some fruit in this place that we can roast." The old man made another grasping motion, and a string of black grapes flew over into his hand. There were more than 30 of them clustered together, and every one looked plump and juicy. However, after looking at them, Suqing realized that they looked a lot like eyeballs. What was more, they were trembling. He even saw a slit appear on one, which opened slightly to reveal an eye within. Suqing's heart started racing. "Is that?" Erniu felt like he was being struck by heavenly lightning. As the both of them reeled, the old man squeezed one of the grapes between his fingers. A faint howl of anguish could be heard. Then he tossed it to the side. A boom echoed out as the grape suddenly expanded in size. It turned into a huge eyeball that shone with blinding light. In fact, it was one of the suns that had appeared on Suqing's journey when he encountered the god's dream. Back then, Erniu had said that the god was terrifying, and that the dream was half real. Right now, the suns from that half-real dream were now in this old man's hand, and he said they were fruit. Su-Ching inhaled sharply while Ernia's mind reeled. Then they watched blankly as the old man scraped some meat off the sun and threaded it onto some skewers. He started roasting it. Taking a deep breath, Su-Ching rose to his feet and bowed. "Senior, allow me." The old man smiled and handed the skewers to Su-Ching. When Su-Ching took them, he felt immense force buffeting his hands, and he very nearly dropped the skewers. He immediately tapped into his cultivation base and fleshly body power to bolster himself, and in that way managed to keep them steady. He carefully put them over the fire. Ernie looked at the grapes, and suddenly felt an immeasurable sense of longing. Thumping his chest, he said, "Senior, I can tell the fire's about to go out. I'm good at stoking fires. I have strong lungs." Ernie hurried over, squatted next to the fire, and started blowing on the flames. The old man looked at the two of them and smiled mysteriously. He did nothing to stop either of them, and thus Su-Ching and Ernie worked hard together to roast the grapes. The first skewer went to the old man. As for the second skewer, Su-Ching turned to look at his eldest brother, who had been working very hard. "Go ahead and give it to him," the old man said casually. Ernie excitedly took a skewer of roasted grapes from Su-Ching and started eating. His eyes shone. When Su-Ching reached the last skewer, he took a deep breath and started eating the grapes. Rumbling filled him, and as his soul reached a state of being completely full, it rose to a higher level. His God source also started seething. As of now, there was no sound other than that of the eating and the swallowing of food. Sometime later, Su-Ching was truly unable to eat anything further. However, seeing that his eldest brother wasn't done, he handed him the half skewer he had left over. Ernie excitedly took it and started wolfing down the grapes. As the old man watched, he rubbed his belly and got to his feet. "Given how we met here, I'd say we're connected by destiny. I'm here waiting for a little something to arrive. Once it's here, I'll be leaving." He looked at Su-Ching and Ernie. "You're not members of my clan, but you are human. The world you live in managed to attract the attention of eminent desolation. It's hard to say if that's a good thing or a bad thing for the living things in your world. As for you, boy," he focused on Su-Ching, "it was a member of the elder generation who crafted that fleshly body for you, am I right? Whoever it was, they were very daring. The method used was wild and bold. That said, you shouldn't have come to the primeval sea. Now that you're here, your aura could easily spread to all the star rings. That's why I noticed you when you arrived. I wanted to see for myself this body of yours that was created with the flesh of eminent desolation. It really is an unprecedented path. Unfortunately, the humans in your world don't know very much about the primeval sea. Therefore, you don't know why you shouldn't come here. So it's all very understandable." As the old man spoke, his eyes gleamed with admiration. "You have good character, boy. You know how to be helpful, not just take advantage of others. You also worked hard for monster. Whatever. I guess I might as well help you get rid of some of that filth on you." The old man waved his hand. Instantly, a wind of flames rushed toward Su-Ching and Ernie. An instant later, Su-Ching heard a scream of anguish from behind him. Two shadowy figures materialized out of both him and Ernie. The hot wind sent them spinning backward, until they were floating some distance away. The two soul shadows merged, turning into the little girl that they had run into at the very beginning of their sea journey. It hadn't actually left them. Upon appearing, the girl looked in terror at the old man. "Screw off," the old man said coolly. The girl shivered and disappeared. Su-Ching and the captain were shaken. Rising to their feet, they clasped hands thankfully. Of course, they had countless questions that they wanted to ask. However, that was when the old man suddenly looked up into the sky. A faint smile appeared on his face. "The little thing I've been waiting for is about to arrive."